we thought we would unpack science of the flux capacitor. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
It's a slogan we should put on the t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift.
Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Roger. I've woken up after my nice sleep from last week.
You recovered?
Yes, I recovered. It's all good now. Back on track.
Well, for those that didn't tune in to our last episode, we were hit with a question from our one and only MAGA listener that we must have picked up when we attended the MAGA event in Sydney for Election Day coverage. Now, I have a follow-up. So for those who didn't listen, this listener wrote in and asked a bit about the Liberation Day tariffs that have happened in the United States. Trump pretty much tariffing and starting a nuclear trade war with the world, I guess, at this stage. Even the penguins. Yeah, I wasn't aware that we owned those set of islands that no one lived in. Is that true? Is it an Australian thing?
What, that we own shit that no one else wants?
No, what's the islands I'm thinking of?
I don't know. I don't even know what they're called.
There's a series of islands, right, that only penguins and seals inhabit, and even they had a 10% tariff whacked on them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they might have rare earth minerals, so we wouldn't want to.
No, the explanation was given that if we don't tariff every single country, it'll be an open door for China to funnel all the tariff off this tiny island.
Except that doesn't explain why Russia, Belarus, North Korea, and Cuba were exempt. But anyway,
there's active negotiations going on right now. Okay, So anyway, we responded to that. So you go back and check that out if you want. And actually, our MAGA listener wants to go. So has responded, and I have a little bit of feedback for the both of us, something for myself and something for you, Andy. So here we go. So this one says, Roger, thanks for responding to my question about Liberation Day tariffs. Unfortunately, all I took away from your answer was you said that South Korea had a 90% tariff placed on the United States, but actually it was only a 50%. Please do your research. So that was my little slap over the knuckles. Yours is a little bit worse. As for Andy, your insistence that MAGA supporters are dumb and idiots is beyond. And in fact, even just this week, a handful of nations, including Vietnam, Israel, and the whole EU, has offered a 0-for-0 tariff arrangement. Isn't this exactly what could be the strategic end goal?
So that's it. That's all our MAGA base has to offer is we'll tank the global economy so Trump can get a better tariff deal with Vietnam. Is that the score?
You got to break some eggs to make an omelet. Except we can't find eggs right now.
All right, look. Can I just say to the first piece about the MAGA base and the MAGA supporters, like I think especially in Australia, most people would be pretty kind of aghast at like what's going on. So I don't think many people would fit into this category. But if you're someone who maybe flirts with the notion that there's any semblance of credibility in Trump, his regime, his administration, like maybe you're hanging on to some last vestige of hope that like, yes, there really is like some strategy here, or there really is some method to the madness. And like, I think it's time for a bit of a reality check. Like, I think I think you're missing all of the signals available to you. And if I could think of like the best analogy, I talked about the Scientologists last week about how, if you grow up in Scientology, you might not know any better. I was just on like the Fox News website because I was just curious, like what kind of information ecosystem do you have to be in to genuinely like not see straight when it comes to Trump?
Whoa. And the Fox News universe is very straight. It's ultra straight. Thank you very much.
Well, it's straight, but a bit queer at the same time.
Don't take that away from them, please.
If you're flirting with this idea, like this is the like picture like a cult, right? And your views of like people who are engaged in cults, whether that's, you know, I don't know, the Waco stuff or the Hale-Bopp, what was the Heaven's Gate people, or you know, like this, there is like this real psychological phenomenon that happens, and that to me is pretty much what the MAGA kind of base is like, right? They're true believers, but as a result, they can't see anything else. I think that's most of the MAGA base, but there is this fringe of the MAGA base, like the Peter Thiels or whatever, right? Who are almost like suffer from this like smartest man in the room syndrome thing. And Elon Musk would be definitely like, this would explain him, where there's either, I don't know, it's like the just the confidence in oneself such that you can't see genuinely where you're failing in your own take on the situation. And that's why I think there's no point even trying to communicate with these people, because they're not speaking the same language. They're not, it's like trying to convince like a Mormon who knocks on your door to convert you that actually they're wrong. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah. Look, Andy, I mean, this is kind of why I was pushing back against your response to, you know, try to give the listener or this MAGA listener some respect, right? Because I do think that sometimes like we don't want to dehumanize the situation, right? And I think that you know, you've painted them out as someone who doesn't want to listen or just wants a little rhetorical talking point, and you know that might be true in terms of a tribal sense.
I think that is true, though. That is okay.
But what I'm trying to say is that this person is still listening, right? They're still asking, and I
let's shake them out of it. Shake them out of their.
But you don't do that by just calling them, you know, beyond the pale. Is all I'm saying, right? So because what we said was, okay, look, there could be an angle here. He's brought in some evidence of perhaps that happening. Now we would probably turn around and say, hey, that's an error of chance potentially. But what I guess what I would say is that, look, I don't think that the MAGA base is, you know, all this kind of cult believers and susceptible psychologically. I do think that there is some kind of angle, and like you said, with Elon, with the Peter Thiels, these tech bros, that they're drawn towards a disruption narrative. This idea of like disrupt. And the only way we're going to get a different result is to try something radical, right? So it's that kind of anti-conservatism that you're talking about.
So those people don't win you elections, right? So they're this weird, clunky, kind of awkward group of, like, they're just the weirdos, right, in society, right? They're those people. The people who win you elections are people who are completely disengaged from politics. And in the Trump case, it's people who are very disengaged or who feel burned. There's no rational, plausible. I mean, if you're trying to compare the extremes of like the Peter Thiels of this world, who, by the way, like supports Trump because Peter Thiel's got this obsession with the Antichrist, right? Like these are weird people, right? And they might actually have some really elegant, coherent explanation for what they're doing, as would Musk, but like these people are very narrow. Like this is a very narrow spectrum of the population.
Well,
right?
Spectrum is probably the right word.
whereas like when it comes to Trump and it comes to like, we're talking about people who think that like, yeah, I mean, like these like Trump's the champion for the anti-woke stuff. He's the champion for bringing prices down. He's the champion for, you know, Joe Biden's about to die, you know, like, well, but this is a very superficial way to engage in the 2024 election, right? Or to have engaged in the 2024 election, right? So all of the reasons to vote for Trump in 2024 were incredibly superficial. All of the reasons not to vote for Trump were actually quite serious and profound, right? Now, I know what you're saying, like, and I don't disagree with your sentiments, but the reason I'm talking about that kind of point, it isn't as some sort of like, oh, you know, Trump supporters, aren't they like, you know, dumb shits or whatever. But like it's kind of true, right? You've got people who kind of still kind of playing along with the line that, oh yeah, this is actually a good move, right? When I don't think anyone's serious, anyone who knows what they're talking about, like who out there, like even on the Fox News website I just went to, there wasn't like, oh yeah, this is a good move by Trump. They just ignored it. Like they're just basically not reporting on it.
At a very singular level, there could be, right? Like for example, like I am an auto worker in the Detroit area, and there's actually now a deal that, you know, Hyundai is going to pump in this massive plan, and I personally will be able to get a job.
Let's think about this for a second. If you care about that automotive worker in Detroit, why would you put tariffs on things that auto worker has to consume in their daily lives that America doesn't produce? Like, why would you tax bananas, for example? Why would you be taxing intermediate goods that are required for the production of cars in Detroit to make them more expensive and basically to make supply chains inoperable? Why would you create so much chaos around the tariff announcements such that you're not giving investors and like manufacturers who have to make long-term planning decisions a sufficient basis to plan and actually buy into the regime? So by that logic, it even if that is your logic, it's still flawed.
I totally get. All I'm saying is, if I'm that auto worker and now I potentially get a job and have dignity again, then there's a rational kind of response in that worldview for that person. All I want to kind of wrap up is just saying that, look, if by chance, and we're not talking about intent here, the outcome is that Trump manages to weasel and bully his way into freer trade agreements with some major countries, that could objectively be a good thing, bar all the chaos and damage that's done.
Except that's not what's happening.
No, but if that does happen at the end, all I'm saying, that's all I'm just acknowledging that could be a good thing. The EU has offered a 0-0 arrangement now, right? That didn't exist before this, this self-inflicted punch in the nuts.
Well, can we just clarify that was on the table before the tariff announcement? This is not a consequence of the crazy tariff strategy. This was something the EU offered in negotiations to ward off the announcement. So if this was genuinely the outcome being solicited by Donald Trump, he had it even before and he didn't go for it. So that's the flaw in that line of thinking, I'm afraid.
Yeah. It reminds me of that email bankruptcy thing that we spoke about, how when you come back from leave and you've got too many emails, just delete everything and then you wait for the important people to email you back. I feel like that's what's going through Trump's head. He's like, well, how do I still control the narrative and stay relevant? I'll just blow everything up. So now he's getting exactly what he wants because he's got a list of 70 countries trying to get a meeting with him.
The US president doesn't need to fight to get meetings with people.
True.
We often talk about Donald Trump as not really being a conviction politician in anything. He's just a motherfucker, basically. But I think on this issue, that's actually misguided because he is a conviction politician on the question of tariffs.
I think we both knew that, but maybe we mischaracterized him by saying he wasn't ideological in that way. And it seems like more and more the proof is that he is regarding trade deficits.
Do you know what I really hope? The version of the trolling, they're enjoying watching, let's get the popcorn out. I really want the MAGA base to suffer really fucking hard from this. I can't wait to see them struggling, hardcore struggling, because they got themselves into this mess because they didn't pay attention. And I'm up for it. I'm ready to watch, ready to get the popcorn out.
How long?
It's a shame the rest of us have to be in that boat too.
How long do you think it'll take, though? Do you reckon it's an 18-month proposition before it literally becomes dystopian? And,
I think we'll just get to whatever the new normal is. The markets will eventually steady at whatever the new level is. There'll be a bit more confidence in what the future looks like after all the adjustments have taken place. And then things will just slowly kind of rebuild, albeit productivity and growth and all that, the economic impacts will be absorbed by that point. And then people don't care. People don't think about these things through the lens of, if this fuck up hadn't occurred, we would be 20% richer and more prosperous. People just think, oh, good. Well, I'm 20% worse off than I would have been had Trump not done this. But I'm 2% better than I was last year, so things are on the right track.
How are they even going to, don't they need to double the size of the government to even enforce this crazy tariff? How are they even going to do it?
Well, Elon Musk has created a lot of new capacity in the government, so
some code somewhere. Yeah. Is there a part of you though, Andy, that actually if you strip it all away, there is something, how they say, the American dream is not just getting a cheap washer and dryer. Is there something in your mind that actually there should be, not tied to this crazy global trade war. But there's something in the soul of like the West that should actually have a good hard look at themselves. And, you know, when you buy those pair of Nikes that have been made by little brown hands in a country far, far away, like actually that this is a reckoning.
That literally is the American dream, to have cheap Nikes and cheap fucking washing machines. Like that is the American, that's the, like that is the very definition of the American dream.
I don't know, man.
Like,
on Yellowstone, it looks a bit different, the American dream. But I'm just serious. I'm serious though. Like, isn't there something that's bad for the soul that actually, like, when you buy that, you know, incredibly cheap thing, you know, from Walmart, that actually there's like a rot of the soul that's going on. Like that you are wasting things and consuming things like a fucking hungry caterpillar while you know devastation is happening to these other countries. Like
the prosperity, like in a place like China, like hundreds of millions of people are taken out of poverty into, you know, a middle class existence off the back of good economic policy. And this is really real. And the irony is, like, the biggest beneficiary is the West. The biggest beneficiary is the high income economies, not just because they can buy cheap shit, but because they get to specialize in like services, which everyone hates, because you know services is like, you know, you ask Donald Trump, probably the most terrible thing ever, but that's where the money is. That's where the cushy jobs are. Like, yeah, go to university, like acquire high advanced skills, and then get jobs in services. And yeah, like there's problems in that creates winners, and there's a cohort that don't necessarily get to tap into the economic opportunities in quite the same way. But that's why, anyway, like I look at a country like Australia and I think we've actually nailed it, because we've found the way to give economic prosperity to people who can tap into the services economy. But we also provide economic prosperity to those who don't, who, you know, use their hands, for example. Like you can get a great job if you're a doer, not necessarily a laptop jockey. So
yeah, I agree. The other thing is, right, like, and I just want to test this with you. It seems like he is intentionally tanking the world economy. Now, I'm going to go Game of Thrones Littlefinger for a second and say that chaos is a ladder, right? And we know from history that anytime there's some kind of crash or chaos in the markets or in a country, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and they come out, you know, Warren Buffett comes out with a record, whatever, he's sitting on a whole bunch of dry powder. Is there anything in here that actually you buy into, that actually the chaos of it all is going to allow the rich or the people with the ability to scale to actually make some incredible wealth?
Well, what's the saying that Liberation Day was buy another yacht day for a whole cohort of lobbyists and various other, like, you know, people with very soft kind of, you know, arguably corrupt ties to the administration. Like, so, I mean, yeah, of course that could be a thing, but I just don't know, like, doesn't this just go to the, like, just how deplorable Trump is, like, in terms of that that for him is his priority as a almost 80-year-old man who's elected to the highest office in his country, who, you know, could be, like, is going to die in, like, within 20 years, probably.
Oh, he might be working on that too.
And like what for what? Like, who's already got like almost an unlimited amount of you know, financial wealth to that, like, what, there's nothing else that he could really, you know, aspire to. He probably just actually wants to play golf. And
he is.
Like, what like, out of the vanity of wanting to be proven right or wanting to get one over other people, or, you know, just like, what a deplorable man. But I just, maybe the last thing I want to just say is to speak directly to this listener who, you know, he is, I mean, I want to snap my fingers and say snap out of it, but like, I think there's a certain kind of trolling element that, like, sometimes like the MAGA crowd, like there's a certain kind of like educated troll who, like, they get the limits of MAGA, like, but they like to kind of indulge in it because it's like that whole, yeah, then they start rolling out like TDS, you know, Trump derangement syndrome accusations and all this sort of stuff. Like, there's a certain kind of enjoyment in being a MAGA troll. So I think maybe there's part of that that's kind of harmless, but so if that's you, listener, like, dear listener, if that's you, okay, like, I mean, I might not have like high regard for that, but hey, I literally like watch trolls like on YouTube every day. So a part of me can't like claim the moral high ground on that if it's just that. But like on the flip side, if that's not what's going on here, if you genuinely believe there's something really strategic and like in the best interests of, well, if obviously he's a US president, so he's got to be looking after American interests. Like if you genuinely think this is in America's interest, then I think you just maybe have another look and just maybe read some other sources. Maybe like don't just stick to what you're hearing, because like you're probably getting like one very narrow like slice of the information landscape. And then like to take one step removed, because like I don't know where this listener is, but like if they're part of like the global, if they're in Australia, for example, then this is certainly not in the global economies and the rest of the world's interests either. So to pay you the respect to, rather than just calling you stupid or whatever, that's not necessarily the intent. But just to say, hey, go and just like listen to other points of view and see where that takes you.
Well, he has listened to the middle, so that's all I mean. Like I refuse to believe that someone that would sit through our show is irredeemable. Sometimes I think this whole disrupt culture from Silicon Valley and the tech bros has a lot to answer for, right? And I have this memory when I was very young. There was this abandoned house near where we used to live, and on the weekend, friends and other people and just people from the neighborhood would come up to this random house that was no one lived there anymore and just break it, like throw rocks through the window, smash out the windows, like kick the door, just generally be disruptive and destructive. And I sometimes reflect on that, on what it says about human nature, that is actually, like, if we admit it to ourselves, it's fun to destroy things. Like actually breaking things is satisfying. And I think sometimes the MAGA crowd or the people who are into this, they're not the Peter Thiels and Elons that are looking at disruption as a means to something. They just like watching the world burn. Like it's fun to break things. It's fun to see establishments fall, and all the pious kind of elites, owning the libs, all that kind of stuff. I think that's
trolling.
Fun. Yeah, but I think it's genuinely satisfying, right? And I think a big part of it is that as well.
Yeah, and just on that tech bro thing, like, I don't know anything about this listener, but like if you're like a tech bro listener and that's why you're into this, like if that's appeals to you, then maybe like, just at least acknowledge that, like in your own mind, like acknowledge that that's actually motivating you to have like almost like a contrarian view, or like it's actually not your own synthesis of the issues that's led you to hold the views that you hold. It's actually just because you're like, I don't know, you wish you were Elon Musk, or like, you know what I mean? Like it's not.
Yeah.
Remember, like growing up, like Oasis, right? They had this like utterly like flippant attitude. It was almost like it was kind of cool, but it was actually really quite destructive. Like it was like if you start emulating that,
yeah,
that way, that like a rock star can get away with that behavior, but like a regular Joe can't. Just sort of be a bit more sensible.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
All right, Back to the Future. So I think today we're going to do a bit of a like a time travel oriented episode. I think we thought we would unpack time travel and the science of the flux capacitor. And look, in all seriousness, in the same way as that movie was like really just a vehicle to explore, like time travel in Back to the Future was just a vehicle to explore, like what would you do if you could see your parents when they were young. Like that was like the whole concept of a time machine only came as a like, okay, how can we set this up? It's like, oh, okay, we'll make it a time travel movie. And then the whole mystique of the series like grew around the DeLorean and all that. But today I think we're going to do something similar and use time travel to explore some like different takes on history. So I think the first one we're going to like almost like mini thought experiment we're going to do is, if you could go back in history and change one event, what would you change? What would you, like, if you could get in the DeLorean to a time of your choosing and intervene in the events in some way, yeah, what would you change?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that I'll take the hit. I think that it's hard to go past the sheer evil of Nazi Germany And if you start pulling on that thread, I suppose, of going back and killing a baby Hitler or something, you probably go, oh, maybe the better bang for buck is going back to stop the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and stop the whole string of events from World War One and then two, right? And I think that is probably what I do in the end, to kind of. But I guess the problem that I have with the whole situation is that I'm not sure, I'm not sure that would, if you had an ironclad kind of view that would stop things, then maybe. But yeah, that's probably where I'll take the obvious one first. I'll do that. World War One.
Okay. Well, I would go back and stop Metallica from releasing Load and Reload.
No.
What
about Fuel?
Maybe Sananga, maybe. Okay, well, I'm gonna go a bit different to you and say I actually would let all of that stuff run. And that sounds horrible, but I just think sometimes you can't know what the alternative would be, right? So you just don't know. The further, it's like the butterfly. I mean, it is the butterfly effect, right? The further you go back in time, something you change. Eventually, you don't know if the outcome in the long run is actually going to be better or worse. So it's entirely...
I'm rolling that dice, though.
Yeah. Well,
as far as, better or worse, I'm rolling that dice.
But, I mean, it might be better in the 20th century, but you don't know what kind of regimes or what you'd be left with. Now, obviously, if this is a question, do you support the Holocaust or not? Obviously... if you narrow it down to do you support millions of people dying and two world wars, all that sort of stuff? Of course not. So
do you think Kanye West has fallen from grace enough that we can invite him on the middle?
No. But can I even just to give a counter, so a lot of the stability we've had. I mean, the reason we've got nuclear weapons is really because of World War II. So we could sort of imagine a scenario that, all right, well, if you didn't have those wars, you wouldn't have nuclear weapons, but maybe we would actually just have a century of just almost tribal-esque or miniature kind of conflict, like conflicts. What if we never got to any kind of stable peace, which now we're kind of getting upset that's been eroded. So I guess then, so what is my answer then? I think I would, in a long run sense, say that the world that we had, let's say in the 90s, is the world that we want. If we could just lock that in and then just build from that for all eternity, that for me is a really good place to be. But obviously things did go awry. I think you could probably, apart from when Mark Burnett, the producer of The Apprentice, gave Donald Trump a call, and he just that just never happened. I think that could be one way of nipping in the bud. Of course, you could go back to the assassination attempt most recently, but I'd want to pick something, and maybe it's September 11. Maybe you can trace where we kind of went wrong, from September 11. But there is this trajectory where whatever shifted us from the 90s. I think I'd want to find the thing that did that.
I did think about 9/11. And because we have nostalgia for the 90s, and I do honestly believe that was the best base. The Matrix had it right. The peak of human existence was 99 or whatever, 98. But I think 9/11's not going to stop it. It's whatever caused the radicalization against America, the kind of resulted in 9/11. And I don't know exactly what that is.
I don't think that the radicalization against America today is any different to what it was in 2001, to what it was in the 70s or whatever. I think it's just a series of almost flukes of history. 9/11, and now that's not my answer, by the way, but just to take 9/11, that was one of those things where all of the things that had to go right for that to be all coordinated the way it was, it could have been scuppered at any multiple points along the way. So I think, and Trump being elected, we're literally talking about now the erosion of US democracy and democratic institutions in America off the back of one man. This is the great man version, theory of history, right? At it in to perfection. It's hard to think of who else could have done that? like someone who hasn't as much influence, who can build this cult around them, but that has no regard for the system that they're operating within. Like it takes such a unique set of, like there isn't like 100 Donald Trumps waiting in the wings.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe it's an interesting what if is if USA never joined the war effort in World War II, like how that would have actually turned out. That so it'd be very alternate history, I think.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think overall, I think most imminently, I would want to do. Maybe I'd go back to whatever it is that would have prevented Donald Trump from being elected in 2016.
What about Sam Altman? Sorry, not Sam Altman. Sam Bankman-Fried.
Well, maybe Sam Altman is who we should be looking at now for the future. But maybe when we're all slaves to the AIs, we'll be that's Sam Altman. I wish we knew.
Talking about Sam Altman though, we're talking about going back and changing something. But do you know like we're talking about Back to the Future, and famously, he takes back the betting guide and makes a bunch of money, right? I was wondering the other day if I was back in let's just say I was back in the 80s or the 90s or something, and the only difference was that I had access to ChatGPT, right? Like, do you think that would be enough for you to just excel to like what do you think realistically you could achieve if you were the only one who had ChatGPT 4 model and no one else did, and no one else knew you had it, and you could just use it whenever you wanted?
You would I think the first thing you'd have to find the right profession. So you'd obviously have to pick something where ChatGPT works well with. Like, but I mean, you'd just get it to write your essays for you at uni. Like you'd get a PhD. Your productivity would be through the roof, and of course, like no one would second guess you. Like you would just sound so smart.
That's what I mean. Like, it's the limits of your imagination, right? Your creativity. Like, what you're describing is just like a slightly enhanced version of a white collar life. Should there be something grander? Like, should you be able to somehow take over a small nation? Like, how you've got literally, you are the smartest person by a factor of 10, right?
Okay, so if it's pre-internet, so if you've got it before the internet, I think you could probably. I'll tell you what. Ultimately, the problem with having ChatGPT back in say the early 90s is it's not scalable. Like you can't upscale. Like you can be really smart or whatever and be like really knowledgeable, but you can't scale that up. You can't build Microsoft off it, like off the back of it, like a big company like that. So I think
you've also got like every scientific discovery, in your power.
So, I mean, if you have like basically knowledge of the future, so if you know what's happened, like what happens in, say, it's like 93 and you know what happens in 94, then you could definitely do a lot with that. But if it's just the equivalent of like, just knowledge.
Just the knowledge. Like you don't have the future.
I don't think it's enough. Yeah. I think,
anyway.
Yeah, sorry, where were we with Sam Bankman-Fried? So, should the deal, should he have offered the deal? Was that like...
Because I think that Trump would have taken it. I think he's too corrupt not to have taken it.
I think he would have taken it and then have run. Like that's the problem.
Just be even more of a threat because he's got all this money.
Yeah,
but I think that like that gamble, Trump just like there's no way in my mind that he wouldn't take that deal, because you got to remember at the time like Trump didn't even think he was going to make it. This was a bit of a joke for him, right? He was a troll. And there were reports of like post-winning, just the absolute, oh my God, how did we do it? So I think he would have taken it and dropped out.
Do you think, I mean, we've talked about Sam Bankman-Fried before on the podcast.
Maybe we should describe what we're talking about. Sam Bankman-Fried, who's, he was essentially a huge crypto trader and also really into effective altruism, made a gamble to say, how's the best way should I use my funds? Let's give Trump like a couple of $1 billion to pull out of the 2016 race.
No, I think it was the 2020 race, wasn't it? Well, because Sam Bankman-Fried didn't have any money in 2016.
My timeline's again sketchy, but yeah, okay. Well, either way, right?
Like for me, an interesting like dimension to this question is because, of course, like he did a lot of dodgy stuff, or at least not prudent stuff, and ended up like losing a lot of money and is now in jail. But he did it through the lens of like, extreme utilitarian ethics, right? It's like, it doesn't matter that some like rich people lose their money, because like I am concentrating wealth, I'm building wealth so I can do good things for humanity, or even not even humanity, for just, positive utility in the, some kind of global sense. Like the irony is, I think probably someone like Sam Bankman-Fried, as terrible as he is, has actually probably gained more credibility since Trump's been elected, because it's probably like, you kind of need, maybe you just need that kind of ruthlessness. Maybe he's like the antidote to someone like Trump, like you need that. Everyone else is trying to win at all costs. So we've also got to win at all costs too. Otherwise the bad guy's going to win. So I don't know, like maybe he should run for president. Maybe he should be the next Democratic nominee. I don't know.
But don't you think, like, going back to what we were speaking about alienating the MAGA base or whatever, don't you foresee an alternate universe or alternate reality where the left embraced the issues of those people and took all the oxygen away before Trump was managed to like seize that base?
I think the best way to characterize the MAGA movement, like for me, is that you actually have the foundation is built off a coalition of lots of different interests. Because, there's this whole thing, they're this disheartened sort of anti-elite, like who feel like they haven't benefited from the modern economy. Or
Don't forget the Latinos.
Like that's one of the foundations, but there's like it's just like a coalition of lots of different things that got them to be like Trump interested. I don't know, what's the word? Trump, like curious or something.
Sounds like a sexual preference.
But then what happened is once they get close, once they reach Trump curious stage, they then get sucked into the vortex of the cult of Trump. And then they get converted into something completely different. And it's actually not about their own interests once they get sucked into the cult of Trump. So it's not like the original thing that got them to that stage in the first place no longer defines them. They then become converts to the religion of Trump. And I think that's why I don't think there's like, you can necessarily say it's all about how like the Democrats just should have like managed that cohort in the first place. Like,
Cult of the personality.
you could go back to the assassination attempt. You say, if it's just like literally like 5 centimeters or even less than that probably, and we would have a very different world. I think that would have been bad for other reasons. Don't get me wrong, like I'd take that if it just made all the problems go away. I think that would have had other problems, but maybe the exit point would have been something like just, I don't know, he just didn't get that reality TV gig. I don't know.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to another area. So let's carve up another little hypothetical for us in our time travel journey. So this one's going to be, if you could pluck a figure from the past, so a person from the past, and implant them into the future, who would it be, and for what purpose?
All right, so we've talked a bit about Trump. I'd love to have someone like Winston Churchill, like in the 21st century, because, well, for one, Trump like respects Winston Churchill. Like he put the bust of like Winston Churchill back in the Oval Office or whatever. And just that, and like we all know that Winston Churchill, like just, I mean, his version of ape shit, whatever that is, like probably, making a big grunt or something. But I'd just love to be a fly in the wall of like Winston Churchill like giving it to Trump, and then Trump just like cowering because he like respects this man so much. Maybe the Queen of England, because the Queen of England, like he respected the Queen as well. Anyway.
Yeah, like what, like Elizabeth?
Yeah. That's probably like maybe like the serious answer, but that's a bit boring. I don't know, like I'm tempted to say like something in the cultural space, like bring back someone whose potential wasn't. I mean, you could say I'll bring back Kurt Cobain or something, and we'll have like another couple of Nirvana albums, but that seems a bit hollow too. I don't know. What about you?
Okay, I've got two. I've got one that's kind of in the cultural space, and one that's more in the historical kind of great man space. So I'll start with the serious one. I would be tempted to bring back someone from the Abrahamic religions. Right, like I think that you could mount a case that a lot of the, atrocities and what's gone off the rails is actually to do with religion. And I'd be tempted to bring back someone like Jesus or Muhammad to be like, hey, look, You have active, like you have a church, you have an active, congregation in the world. Fix it. Like look it in the eye and like fix it, right? Like come back, Mohammed, and deal with this, right? Like that could be like a very, I mean, that would be so interesting on how that would play out, right? If somehow they could be acknowledged as, as who they were. So that's probably my serious thing, and I like talk about reformation.
they just have wars over like disagreeing that it is who.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they'd have to kind of have the whatever. Well, put it this way, Andy. Whatever they did the first time around, they would have to be equally as successful, if not more, because they've got Instagram now. Now, the real Jesus, the real Muhammad, IG Twitter account,
and the Jews would just not believe any of them. But
standard. So that'd be like actually thrilling to understand how that would go down. So yeah, Jesus or Muhammad. On the cultural side, like I think we're sleeping on John Lennon. I actually think that as a bridging personality of the culture and the effect that was having, like that, the kind of bridge between the beatnik hippie kind of new world liberal imagine. I actually think that would have been really interesting to bring back someone like John Lennon and actually to have this vision of masculinity, of what it meant to be living a good life and in touch with like emotions in the world and the creation of art. Like it's something that I do think would have been a very interesting thing, especially for the times that we're at, right? Like how influential, how he chose to use his fame. Yeah, I think that'd be my pick.
Notwithstanding George Harrison, but like, do you think if John Lennon was still around, that we would have had like some massive like stadium reunion kind of bonanza? Like, it's hard to think you wouldn't, but like,
but that's what I mean. Like maybe this kind of bridge between like what we could have been and versus what capitalism is now. Like maybe it could be as profound as that we would have a different attitude towards like the modern view of like, we're so cynical now because of, like you said, we just said that it's inevitable that if there's money on the table, these bands will get back together. But that like maybe things would have turned out a bit different. I don't know.
Yeah, I like the pick. Like John Lennon died before we were born, so we don't have like a good like this. We don't have a direct sort of connection with, like, he was always dead, right, in our for our whole life, right? Certainly when he became musically awake. So I guess then I was thinking before, well, who would you bring back? Like, and I went to Kurt Cobain because like he's probably the most recent. Well, like of that, let's say 27 Club or whatever. He's not the most recent, but like he's
he's like
Hendrix
and stuff.
It's like the biggest figure who in our lifetime. But then even then, he was probably a bit like, we're probably a little bit young for him. But is there any other like celebrity that if you could just bring them back that in our life, and they don't have necessarily even be like a celebrity, they could just be a figure that, I mean, I was sort of thinking like, I mean,
I miss Michael Jackson.
Yeah, there's like 20,000 kids that
20,000. Well, that's like Bill Cosby numbers.
Yeah. No.
But you're trying to think about people who passed
away
too soon,
right?
right?
I think Michael Jackson was past his prime era.
Yeah,
like in some ways,
I was just saying that to be funny, but
like Heath Ledger seems to be one that he had a massive career ahead of him and was like the essence of youth, or not necessarily youth, but like a young actor. I think that one hit pretty hard.
Yeah, a lot of people would say like someone like a Kobe Bryant who died tragically. Maybe, like, I don't know about the cultural relevance, but
yeah. After he retired as well. I guess the other one is like like growing up, the biggest, most significant like death. I think
Diana.
was like Princess Diana, right? And it's hard, like it's.
But I don't think that story would have ended well, man.
Well, it might not have. I mean, I don't think it was. I mean, she was already out of the royal family by that stage, but like maybe like even just that. Somehow they just managed to like suck it up and just get on with it. Like she'd be the Queen of England. Like it would like would we have had Meghan Markle and the Harry William breakup? Like would that have?
I don't think we would have. We spent the whole last question talking about how to deal with the problem with the Orange Man. Now, this is what we should have been doing, right? Like if you're saying, all right, we need a heavyweight to come back and neutralize this guy, surely someone like a founding father, like you would pluck Mr. Washington back, right? Or someone, or, you know, or Jefferson or someone like that, right? Or Abraham,
Hamilton,
or Lincoln, right?
Alexander Hamilton.
I was about to say Hamilton.
He can be the Democratic nominee and finally be president.
Federalist. But seriously, like say you take like a Lincoln or a Washington, surely that would be enough to neutralize Trump.
Well, if you believe Trump, he's like, some say better than Washington, you know.
2.0. But seriously, that would be potentially like what would be
I don't
interesting.
know. Do you know what? Honestly, I don't know.
No, it would.
No, I don't think. I think there's a cult around Donald Trump that is so profound and so dismissive of tradition and respect for the institutions of government in America that I don't know that people would be swayed by like bringing back George Washington. Like honestly, like I mean, you'd have to think it would because you know he's on the freaking dollar note and revered as like almost a religious like figure or whatever. But like I don't know, like
if the founding fathers, I believe that the founding fathers, and this is bar them coming back and actually being incredibly heinous, that we, you know, history didn't get that right. Like there's this school of thought that actually George Washington had the most diabolical teeth you've ever seen, and like he had slave teeth and wooden teeth and like just like all these problems, right? Like bar that thing where you just like look at the guy and like, oh my god, I can't there's something going on here, like I just can't, you know, get in, or he drops the N word too much. I can't believe somewhere like America, who's so in touch with their founding narratives, wouldn't be able to overcome a figure like Trump.
So if they're like commentators, like from the side, giving their views and maybe expressing counsel to the rest of the US population, I just think Trump would just go on the attack and belittle them. Like he'd go after the wooden teeth, you know, like he'd
you got dog teeth.
It would just, yeah, I just
Your
don't
wife's
believe
a dog.
you wouldn't have yeah,
I love black people. You own black people. I love black people.
You don't look black.
You don't look black. Very good at sports, so I hear. No, but yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. We've been very Western with our views too, right? Like, I mean, there's the whole atrocities in Eastern Europe and China and stuff like that we haven't touched. But anyway.
All right. So
typical whiteys.
Let's go to Back to the Future Part 2, specifically into the DeLorean set. What was the gap from like the 1985 to 2015?
Yeah.
So that's 30 years. So
they definitely undercooked that.
The good thing about Back to the Future Part 2 is the future still looks like the future even today. Like it doesn't. It just.
Well, we still don't have a cure for Parkinson's, unfortunately.
Anyway, but back to what we were talking about. So 30 years in the future. What does 30 years in the future look like?
30 years in the future from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so kind of 2050s. There's a tendency to kind of temper your views because of just how slow change has been, I suppose. From a kind of, you know, like growing up, we watched shows like The Jetsons and things like that, and Futurama or whatever. And, you know, what's that line? You know, we were promised flying cars and all we got was 150 characters. I think that's staining or tinting my view on this, that actually things move much slower than we think. I'd like to think that in 30 years, I'd like to think that that we will be on the verge of a big breakthrough, which will involve some level of semi-terrestrial existence. Now, maybe not obviously going to Mars or something, but it could be perhaps there is a whole community that lives in some outer part of the atmosphere, potentially. I'd say that humans are starting to augment themselves, and that could be in the form of like, you know, like Gattaca, where there's certain options available to you to kind of sterilize certain genes or promote certain other genes. I wouldn't be surprised. And I would say that there'll be a form of intelligence that is very intermingled with society. So I think that in that way, it will be hard to tell. Like, I think this idea of like we will age cognitively to a certain period, and then AI will augment us so that we actually never decay from that point, at least cognitively, right? And whether it's through robots or through some kind of neural link or kind of stuff like that, I think that in the future they will find a way to use that technology to stop the rotting of the brain.
All right. So when was the first time you used the internet, like growing up?
We were quite late getting a home computer, but I used it at a friend's house maybe pretty early on. Like I think when I was maybe like 11.
So like years, like...
Oh, yeah, so like 95?
So 95, 96, 97, that kind of range. Right, so the internet like 30 years, and I think I even remember one of the first times I used the internet. I'd just been back from like this trip overseas. I have this vivid memory of like, maybe it was just like I was looking for what would have a website, and because I'd been to America, been to Disneyland, and I typed Disneyland.com. And like I remember like the bright graphics like of Disney like came up, which at the time were probably really shit, but like at that time they were like amazing. And I remember thinking, oh, that's incredible, because like I don't know what the like promotion or what the thing they had going on, but they had some, like they have those seasonal things where they're like nights in spring or some shit like that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that advertising thing in person because I'd just been to America. And then like, oh my God, like I'm seeing that same thing here in Australia, however many thousands of kilometers away. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit. Like, so anyway, where I'm going with this is that I think we now look back fondly on the internet and we say the internet was like this exciting, like expansive, like the wild, wild west, like almost like exploring something new for the first time, and how amazing like it was from a like just exploring and trying new things, right? Whereas now I think we look at the internet and we go, oh, now it's being controlled, having to sign those freaking like, do you accept cookie notices because like the European Union compels it, to the Great Wall of China kind of making Bill Clinton look really silly, to the fact that like you've got social media, seems like that we're all like we've all gone crazy, and like anyway, so sorry, that's a really long-winded way of introducing. I think the same thing is going to happen with ChatGPT and like large language models and AI, right? I think that's going to morph in some really like weird direction that we're not going to recognize from today. And I don't know what it is, but it's almost like it's going to start to hack us, and all of the commercial interests that are behind it are going to be geared to like, how do we monetize this thing? And it's going to take us down like a pathway which we can't possibly or we wouldn't recognize now, and we're going to remember back to the day. Oh, remember when we used to like have like ask them to come up with silly songs and stuff, like, or like write a joke, we're going to remember all those really quite like, and how novel that was to our experiences. Anyway, so in 30 years time, the adventure we get from using things like ChatGPT is going to dissipate, like completely go. We're going to feel really
But that's what I mean. When it jumps the shark into like, when it gets out of this, we're still limited by our imagination on like typing into a keyboard. I do like the power is actually what's happening in the engine, right? And I think that once they work out how to overcome that barrier of trying to express yourself by typing on a QWERTY keyboard, then things might take off a little bit differently. And I do wonder if like, there's a part of me that wonders if someone drops ChatGPT into your brain, like even like as it is right now, and you're not typing things in, it's just like all your thoughts and all your consciousness gets to interact with the model, like that would fundamentally change you, right? You're going to find religion pretty fast, or whatever the new version of that is. Like I think that that's kind of where I see like, well, where it could go as well. But equally, like, I mean, the safe bet is it's just some mundane shit, like you said, where it's just, wall-to-wall OnlyFans advertising. But yeah, I don't know.
Do you think, like, let's get a little bit more existential here. Like the obvious, if you're casting forward, I think the obvious thing is to do the whole... who was it? Was it not? Who was the philosopher that talked about the tightrope with like nuclear, in the context of nuclear weapons? It's a British philosopher. The names escaped me, but there've never been as many people on this planet as there are today who could basically destroy the planet in a single decision, right? So, maybe like in the hours after World War II, when they dropped the nuclear bomb in Japan, you could maybe not even say that Harry Truman even had that power, like, because it's like they only had like a small number of weapons or whatever. But like since then, it's grown to like probably thousands of people now who could unilaterally, and the more that grows, especially now, we're starting to talk about other ways that we could possibly destroy ourselves. And in some ways, we're destroying ourselves from within through these other like ways, like social media and stuff. So I guess then the question is should we genuinely contemplate the end of humanity? And when will that happen? It's bound to happen.
Yeah. Is Bertrand Russell, by the way.
Yep, that's it.
And I think that I foresee a time where, like, I think it's very telling that something like ChatGPT or a large language model has been the first instance of AI, rather than probably what people thought, which was, like an iRobot style, automaton kind of, robot, humanoid robot. And I do think there's something in there where, like, consciousness or our idea, like, there'll be more and more separation from the physical versus like the, your consciousness. I foresee a time where perhaps like it throws off the shackles of like our meat sacks, the part of our psyches that are just chasing down pleasure and avoiding pain, and we want something more akin to like actualization or connection with people or with place. And like I foresee a future where my thoughts around like mental augmentation and then slowing down decay, like where nursing homes are, where essentially you decide that we're going to stop trying to stop the body from decaying. We're going to actually just separate the mind and plug our loved ones into the dreaming, in quotations, and they get to just be free and like enter, they are who they are, but they just enter this kind of virtual world where their consciousness is free to mingle and connect with other people, other consciousness, and they just kind of dream, and they can do whatever they want uninhibited by their body, right? And like I think that once you start messing around with humans like that, and you start to change the nature of what motivates us, I think things fall over pretty quick, or things become very, very unpredictable, right? Like even things like, okay, equally what could happen is this whole like birth rate thing, right? So say like depopulation happens really severely, and it's even exacerbated by the fact that like, there's this theory that a fear of death and the want to reproduce, like pretty much, the want to impress the opposite sex pretty much motivates every single thing in the world. And if that is broken, like if that fundamental evolutionary like motivation is broken for whatever reason, like maybe men prefer to just have relationships with AIs or sex bots or whatever happens, right? Like maybe there's a way of hacking that and turning it off, and they find out actually if you turn it off, people become happier in other ways. I think then it's anyone's guess, like what would happen to humanity, right? Like if you mess with that hardwired kind of fundamental level zero codes in our brains, like, and I think that would be possible in the next 30 years.
I think people will learn the more comfortable our lives become, and I think we're already kind of learning it, in the process of learning it, that like we need to struggle, we need like hardship, and we need to fight for rewards. And the moment you give people like unlimited rewards on tap, and in some domains we're already there, like that's actually not a good thing. And in some ways social media is like a perfect example of that, because it's like we're going to give you unlimited like social connection or rewards, like, or we're going to amplify the nature of it, and it fucks with your brain, especially younger people. I mean, we spoke last week about the nature of like, dating and how that's changing. And like, I think it's good to, just maybe to like experience the real world.
Yeah. And maybe it's totally the opposite. Maybe we throw them out the window. Maybe there's like this huge counterculture of people who say, look,
oh, totally.
Like we're analog community. We don't use AI. We don't,
wouldn't it be funny if the Amish were right after all? All right. Well, see you next week.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk about the pyramids.